This is Honest Tree, back with the vlog, and I have something that's very important to discuss today, which is safety and crashing on group rides. Now, the reason I'm discussing this today in a vlog is that I actually crashed on this ride today, and the reason this particular video is all with the Cycle IQ in 720p is because I never did turn on my GoPro. Just had the Cycle IQ on. It has a longer battery life, so I can keep it on the entire ride essentially. And so I crashed before I turned on my GoPro. So I didn't actually capture the crash. The crash happens with the GoPro Cycle IQ going. And anyway, there's a lot to talk about safety with group rides. Safety is of paramount importance. I used to play a lot of basketball, and actually there's some basketball content on my channel, which is kind of ridiculous and dumb. But anyway, one of my friends, his name is Jeff, he would comment to the other guys, hey, I've got to work this week or next week or whatever, if it's on the weekend. I can't afford to get injured. This is pickup basketball. Let's not kill each other out here. Let's stay safe. Let's not break each other's noses. Let's not, hurt each other's knees, take each other out, tackle people from behind when they're going for a layup. Just don't do that kind of stuff. And so the same applies to cycling. We're out here having fun. We want to get fit. Maybe we want to show off a little bit from time to time. We want to go fast. Maybe it's a surging kind of group ride. That's fine. All of that stuff is predicated on safety first. Now, someone might be saying, hey, I know you, Honest Tree. I've been on rides with you. You're not the safest guy in the world. And I'm not saying I am the safest guy. I mean, I think it's important. I try to be safe. It's one of those things we all have to ask ourselves. How safe am I when I'm riding? Could I be safer? What are my bad habits? Has anyone actually stepped in and told me what I'm not doing right? I can think of a couple of things that happened to me. One of them recently was coming to a stop at a red light, and it was single file, and light turned red, and I could have stayed directly behind the guy that I was like third wheel or something, and I could have stayed directly behind him, but I kind of veered off to the right, away from his wheels, so coming up on his side, not stopping as fast as him. Well, turns out I almost took out someone behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't realize there was someone coming up from behind, and that's one of the key points on a group ride is before you get out of your line, make sure there's no one behind you. Make sure that there's not wheels crossed behind you. Make sure that you're going to be safe when you come out of your line, or else stay in your line. So that's another aspect of safety. So what are the main sources of crashes on a group ride? Well, frankly, I think it's two things. Hazards on the road, so cracks in the road, crap in the road. One guy on one of our rides actually hit a carburetor. I wasn't on that particular ride, but it's a ride that I do. Hit a carburetor in the middle of the road and wasn't able to be communicated back quickly enough. Another ride I did, a guy hit a big, huge rock in the middle of the road, like a big, huge chunk of concrete. And again, it wasn't communicated effectively through the group. Not really the fault of the group, because it's hard to communicate these kinds of obstacles effectively. Second source of crashes on the group rides are the actual riders themselves and mistakes they make. And common ones are crossing wheels, unpredictable movements, just doing dumb things that are unpredictable. Guys that are at the limit are dangerous. Guys that are inexperienced are dangerous on group rides. So you might actually be on a group ride and have identified people that you recognize as dangerous, and they are making erratic movements. They don't look comfortable in the group. They're maybe it's obvious that their fitness isn't very good, and they're struggling to be in the group. And why isn't their fitness good enough to be in the group? Well, because they're probably not riding there very much. They're inexperienced. Their experience is less than the guys that are in the group, and therefore they're struggling to stay in the group. There may be an exception to that, like, someone who is very experienced but just happens to not been riding recently, and they're just, they know they're inexperienced. I mean, not inexperienced, but just out of shape. but they have the experience from the past. Well, that's not always the case. So, what do people do when they recognize that someone is a little bit of a danger? Well, usually the first thing they do is try to stay away from that guy. So, I think, get ahead of that guy. Um, get away from that guy. Don't be next to that guy. There have been times when I've been on a group ride and I've thought the person behind me, or in front of me, rather, in front of me, is a little bit of is a danger, is unpredictable. And I think, well, okay, I'm right behind this guy. Is that a great idea? Well, for one, if I know kind of what they do, I can be prepared for it, which might be better than being the, second guy, the third guy behind him, because maybe the guy that's right on his wheel um, doesn't know that guy, and who knows what's going to happen. Maybe he'll get taken out, and then I'll be taken out because that other guy didn't know what was going on. So when I'm behind someone that is, I think, not very strong, I'm got to be even more attentive and even more careful. Um, there was a big blow up on Facebook recently on one of the rides that I do, and it was related to this topic of safety. And um, one of the things that was debated was, um, I guess, someone was complaining that uh, people are too loud and calling out too many things, and do you have to call out every crack, and do you have to yell and scream, and uh, you know, uh, um, about every single obstacle or thing or puddle. And there's probably a balance to that. I'd rather things be called out. But one time I was on the front and there was a puddle and I scream out like water, and the guy next to me says, "Man, you don't need to scream that out. That's just increasing the anxiety of the group." When it's something like a puddle of water that and it was probably not in a turn or anything, so it wasn't like we're going to be whipping through a turn of a puddle at 30 miles an hour. So that wasn't the case. Um, so that was one of the debates, and then just other things that happen. What is our responsibility to each other? What makes a ride safe? What makes a ride dangerous? Um, the ride that I do most frequently on Tuesday and Thursday is the Pop A, and it widely has the reputation as being one of the most dangerous rides in the Dallas area, the Metroplex. It's probably, some might argue, it has the reputation as being the very most dangerous, and others would say maybe the South Ride, which has the fastest riders. It's probably the fastest group ride in town. That race, that group ride is actually more dangerous, and part of that is probably twofold. One is that the roads are worse down there on the South Ride, and two, it's kind of like a race, so people treat it like a race. They may not always make decisions that are based on safety, but more decisions based on actually going fast and getting ahead and not getting dropped and so forth. So um, the part that really kind of made me mad today about the crash, and the crash is coming up later. I'll put a time link at the bottom to show you where it is. I mean, to be fair, because I have the Cycle IQ on, the crash happened in front of me, so you're not going to actually see the crash. I'll describe it, so don't get excited that, oh, there's going to be this awesome crash. It wasn't that exciting of a crash, but it was a crash, and it kind of ruined my ride. I had to stop riding. So um, it wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy it, but I'm trying to learn from it, and I hope the people involved learned from it, especially the person that caused the crash. So I don't want to pick on anyone. We all make mistakes. Not trying to do anything, but the guy who caused the crash in this ride, I recognized as being potentially dangerous on this ride. And the first sign of this was when we were on the flats on Renner Road, so just rolling out, not going fast. He was struggling a little bit to stay on the wheels. And that was my first indication. And, just looked inexperienced. Didn't look younger guy, looked inexperienced, looked out of sorts a little bit. And so, you file that away in your mind a little bit, like, yeah, maybe this guy's going to get dropped, or maybe I should be a little bit careful around this guy. But you know what? What happened to me? I was directly behind him, going down a hill where the crash happened. So, um, yeah, that was my mistake. I shouldn't have been in that position. Um, I put myself in that position, and I really shouldn't have. I should have been ahead of him, but I wasn't. So I paid the price, and I probably should have made some other decisions as the crash was unfolding, and I didn't. I don't know. I didn't really freeze, but this also goes to kind of the, do I make a sudden movement to avoid a crash, or do I just kind of hold my line and try to go around without getting into oncoming traffic or whatever? These are the decisions that we have to make when we're on a group ride. So one way to stay out of a crash is to be on the very front. Now, you're less likely to get into a crash that way. On the other hand, being in the very front, you might be more likely to get T-bone a car or something like that. But, again, that's unlikely. Um, Being on the front, you have the responsibility to communicate back to everyone else what's going on, obstacles and so forth. So in a race, being on the front is a way to avoid crashes. And so that's why you see, guys in the Tour de France where the leaders are going to be near the front, because you're not going to have that domino effect of a crash going through the group. I made a comment in my first vlog that um, being in a group, like in a race particularly, is like playing Russian roulette. Um, Everyone around you is a potential danger, has the potential to crash. So if you don't have any escape routes, then you have more bullets in the gun when you're playing Russian roulette. So giving yourself escape routes is important to avoiding a crash. I was, uh, I was listening to a guy that I think he was a former professional rider. He said that whenever he's on a group ride, he's always thinking about what his escape route will be if there is a crash. And I think that's good advice. However, it's a little bit difficult to do because a lot of us go out to ride for relaxation and fun. And to have this very guarded way of, or paranoid, or I don't know what the exact word is for that, but to be always on, not on edge, but planning for a crash, or thinking about a crash, or thinking about ways to avoid a crash, is not particularly fun. Can it become second nature, where it's just sort of like you've got circuits in your brain that are doing it behind the scenes, running the program, but it's not in the forefront of your mind? That's probably the best. Trying to avoid a crash in that way. Um, so I was talking with another one of my friends who does the Pop A ride, and we were actually reflecting that the number of crashes on that ride has been very few since at least he and I have been doing it. Uh, the other day, I guess it was this past week, was the first time I've been on a pop ride, whether Pop A or Pop B, that there has been a crash. So that's about over 75 pop rides, most of them Pop A, that there had been no crashes where I was in that particular group. Now, were there, like, for example, one day I was on Pop B, there was a crash on Pop A. I don't count that because I wasn't on Pop A, but yeah, there have been crashes. And some of these crashes were not really user error per se, or rather like a mistake made in bike handling or so forth, for example, but there were like issues of anticipation and perhaps bike maintenance issues as well. So for example, last week, a crash occurred at slow speeds because suddenly the guy's chain dropped from the big ring to the small ring, and he had a decreased um, resistance related to that, and suddenly his leg jerks forward, and his body flies forward, and his bars turn, and he goes over the top, goes down, and takes out the guy behind him. Well, that shouldn't happen. Maybe it's a bike maintenance issue, or controlling your bike when you have unanticipated things like that. But that's not like this guy like suddenly veered out and took out a wheel. Um, Another crash that happened on Pape was related to a car suddenly stopping. Well, not suddenly. The car was going to stop to turn into a convenience store parking lot, and the guys in the front just didn't anticipate that, and they brake, and then everyone else is braking, and it's like that slinky effect. The braking must become much more rapid at the back, and people didn't brake soon enough. Wheels crossed. People crashed into each other. There were a couple of people that ended up going down, or maybe more than two. I wasn't there. Um, those are a couple of the crashes that have occurred on the pop ride. Um, yeah, you see guys here on the ride. They may be gesturing as they're going, and pointing out cracks and pointing out things, and that's really important. We have the responsibility to each other. The number one thing is safety. Um, Is there a way of being safe even if the ride is surging, if the ride is not entirely predictable? So, for example, on the Pape ride, it's not just like like a pace line. There is there are people moving up in the field somewhat unpredictably. Sometimes they're going to the front because there may not be a rotation, but there are guys on the front, coming off the front, going to the front, accelerating, and so forth. It's really important to keep an eye out for what's going on around you. So I am constantly kind of trying to gauge what's going on around me, looking back. Every time I make some kind of thing where I may be coming out of line or going around, you can also notify people what you're doing, like verbally say, um, I'm coming up on your left, or touch them on the hip. I don't actually touch people. I don't. I feel like I have better control of my bike if I keep both hands on the handlebars, and I don't. And I don't touch people, but some people do that. The timing on this video with the audio here and is not exact because I'm watching a rendered version of the video and it keeps pausing and I have to unpause it, so there's going to be a little bit of a delay here. But here's an issue. There's a gentleman behind me, nice guy. I forget his name. Well, if I knew his name, I wouldn't be repeating it here. But he's got aero bars there. So, are the aero bars safe in the group? Mm, People may have opinions about that. There was a guy on the pop ride who also had aero bars and liked to get in on his aero bars during the ride while he was in the pace line. And that I did not feel was safe at all. And I thought about saying something to him, but I didn't. But a couple of my friends said something to him, and instead of responding, yeah, I guess you're right, let me take that under consideration, his response was very defensive, like, I know what I'm doing, don't tell me what to do. Those aren't exact words, but that was the impression that I got from what my friend said, and I think that's a mistake. If somebody in a very calm, polite way talks to you about safety, you should listen to that because more times than not, people aren't going to say something, and they don't want to get involved. They don't like confrontation. Uh, they're just gonna, if somebody actually took it upon themselves to tell you something, listen to it and consider it. And maybe you're angry at first, but think about it, and you know, consider it. Um, I think there's a couple of mistakes. Well, there's two things. People make the mistake of omission, where nobody ever says anything to the dangerous rider. Like, okay, yeah, he's dangerous. Everyone knows he's dangerous. They talk behind his back, but avoid that guy. I've had people on rides, point to me and say, avoid this guy. Be careful around this guy. But does anyone actually talk to that guy so that that guy can improve, so that guy can be told what he's doing? It's probably useful for somebody to talk to them. Now, I was on the Pape ride. This was about, I don't know, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, something. And we were on, I guess it was Parker. And so this is where there's crosswinds and it's usually quite fast and people are putting in big efforts. And the line was accelerating. And I was about seventh wheel or so. And suddenly I had to brake. And I think I felt like I almost hit the wheel in front of me. There's this big jolting braking action that went through the pace line, and one of the riders was screaming, yelling at the offending rider. And so, looking back at the video, what had happened was he had kind of gone off by himself to the right in the wind, and then the next rider kind of came over and went behind his wheel, and I suspect that that rider didn't know that the line was now behind him, and in the process of that, he dropped anchor. Just I don't know what he did, if he hit his brakes or just stopped pedaling or what, but it sent a jolt through the entire line and very easily could have wrecked us out. And he got yelled at, and but at some point, either at the end of the ride or the middle of the ride, or someone else came up to him and explained to him what happened and what he'd done, and I think he received it well. Now we're actually coming up, I think, to where the wreck. So we're going down a hill here. This is where the wreck actually happens. And usually it's not such a hard effort down this hill. It's a windy day. The wind is in our face here. It's a headwind. And what happens here is this junior rider, young rider, skinny, tall. He's right in front of me and he bangs into the rider on his right, body to body, like bang, one, bounces off, bangs against him twice. And then actually on the third bang, uh, he takes out the guy's wheel. They cross wheels and hit wheels, and he goes down. They both go down. And then you can see in the video that I slow down as this is happening and try to get around going to the left, but didn't quite make it, and my front handlebars fall into his back wheel and his spokes, and I go down pretty gently. I don't actually know if my body hit the ground or not. Can't remember. And that also goes to show that it's hard to remember exactly what happens in a crash. But the whole time I was thinking, oh no, is my bike going to be damaged in some way? And that was the main thought going through my mind, as well as the thought of maybe I shouldn't be thinking about my bike and think about these other guys that are on the ground and might be hurt. Um, what do we learn from this crash? Well, this particular rider, in my opinion, was not strong enough for the ride, was not experienced enough for the ride, shouldn't have been on the ride probably. I asked him if he'd done the ride before. He told me he'd done it 4 times before. So I guess, he'd had the experience of being on the ride and had done all right. I don't know. And but today was the first cold day of the year, so a lot of guys who normally do the faster ride than this one actually did this ride, and I was one of those. I was expecting to do the faster ride, but the faster ride was canceled. Guys weren't doing that ride, so the group I was with, we peeled off, and we were part of the next ride down the line, down the chain in terms of speed. Um, so it was more of a mixed group of faster guys and slower guys, but mostly pretty fast, experienced guys. This guy stood out a little bit as not being at the same level. Um, so, he was out of control. Uh, he said something about, like, oh, the wind, I was slowing down and the wind got me, and all I know is that he was out of control, and I can't even explain why, you know, he banged into the other rider the first time, and why he kept, whatever force was causing him to bang into that guy, it kept happening over the next, split seconds. And it's he said, oh, I don't even know what happened. And I believe him. He didn't know what happened. He did not understand what was going on. He didn't know how to correct it. And right after a crash, it's hard to know exactly. It's hard to replay it in your mind exactly what happened. I really wish I'd had my front camera on. Oftentimes I'll turn my front camera on when we do the pop ride as we're going down this hill. That's where I started, but I didn't this time. Would have been good to reconstruct it. Probably would have been good for him to be able to see that and learn from the crash what happened and how he can correct it. Uh, if you cause a crash, own up to it. Apologize to the people that you ride with. and make it your goal to avoid having this happen again, and learn from it. We don't want to crash. We don't want this to happen. We want to be safe. We want to have fun. Um, I think it's, the question of should people yell at people that have caused a crash or done something dangerous. And I would say it's preferable not to yell. I mean, sometimes, like I said on Pop A, when that guy dropped anchor and almost wrecked out a bunch of guys, he got yelled at. And I don't mind the fact that he got yelled at. It's better something is said, I think, than nothing is said. But I think you have to go back later and say, hey, we're calm now, we're good. Let's talk about what happened. And I want to give you some constructive criticism because you're a good guy. I know you want to be safe too. Let's talk about what happened and how you can avoid that in the future. And giving that sort of, I care about you, you're a good guy. Uh, let's get past the yelling that happened and get to the constructive part of how we can be safe. That part, some people skip that part, and that leaves people discouraged and upset and angry, and they don't feel good, and. But the alternative that no one ever says anything is not good either, uh, because people do need to learn, and when people do dangerous things, they need to be called out, and people that can't learn from doing dangerous things don't need to be on these rides. They need to be doing something else. Um, and so, um, yeah, we need a way to communicate to other cyclists about staying safe. And, um, you know, if you're watching this video, you're interested in cycling. You want to be safe. You want to go fast. And it's important that we all work together, that we all focus on the various things that we need to do to stay safe. Be aware of your surroundings. Pay attention. Uh, Stay on wheels. Don't come off your line unless you have to. Signal and communicate when you're coming off your line. Um, you know, if you're needing to brake for some reason, let people know you're braking. If you're slowing and braking and so forth. Um, Take care of each other. Um, it's important that we take care of each other. And I'm not mad at this kid who caused the crash. He's learning. I want him to have a good experience in cycling. I want him to have a safe, awesome cycling experience. Do I want to ride next to him? No, not yet anyway. Not until he learns and gets more experienced. But I want him to have a positive experience. And as it was, I was not hurt in this crash. My shin hurt, so I must have banged my shin on part of his bike. Um, I don't even know that my bike was even scratched. The handlebars fell into his spokes. I didn't see any scratches on my bike. The handlebars got turned a little bit, so I wasn't able to fix that in time, recognize that in time to. It was a little bit of jar, but I thought I'd keep riding once I got back on the bike, and I was like, no, I'm not going to ride with my steering wheel a little bit of jar, especially when I can fix it, and I have a tool in my bag where I can uh, work on those hex bolts and loosen them and get them fixed. So that's probably what I'm working on right here. Um, Here's the next group uh, going down the road. And actually, I don't know if the timing is right, but somewhere around where I'm talking here, there's a group that's gone past, and they asked if we were okay. So a few of us stayed back. There were 4 people involved in the crash. The young guy that kind of instigated the crash, the guy he went into, and then that second guy actually somehow hit the wheel that was on his side and broke some spokes in that wheel. And I don't think that guy went down, and he wasn't hurt. Road rash, I think, for the guy who caused the crash, and maybe road rash for the other guy. Not sure. I didn't experience any road rash. Uh, so I guess this is a rambling mess of a vlog. Maybe I should make an outline where I discuss each and every point in a logical way, which I certainly could do. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about safety. So safety is important. Avoid crashes. important. I want you guys to stay safe out there, continue having fun. Uh, don't be afraid to talk to people about safety. If I'm not safe, I want to know about it. If you're my friend, you're going to tell me about it. And uh, don't be afraid to talk to each other, and don't be afraid to accept criticism. Um, don't be afraid to own up to your mistakes. We all need to stay safe. So have fun out there, guys, and thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.